The GAR is the government's attempt to increase revenues and cut down on black money in the economy. But could the rules have been implemented better? I have with me Ketan Dalal of PwC and Rohan Shah of ELP to answer that question and more. Ketan, let me start by asking you a fundamental question. Every country around the world has a GAR provision in some fashion. So why should investors be outraged that India is also trying to implement GAR?
I think the situation is that there cannot be any conceptual objection to GAR, but there are some points that need to be noted as to why the outrage is there. So I think actually, if you see the sweep of the GAR and the language, it is wider than most other countries of the world. So that's number one. Number two, the invocation fetters are very low. Number three, the onus of proof in GAR in all countries of the world is on the revenue department. In fact, UK came out with a GAR report a few months ago in which they categorically said that the onus of proof of a GAR provision should always be on the revenue department, and here it is on the assessee or the taxpayer, as you know, at least in the form in which it is proposed. And number four, I think we need to recognize that in India there is a fairly strong disconnect between the policy making and the operational ground realities, where even without GAR, the extent of the discretion and is very high, and the process of dispute resolution is very long. So for a variety of these reasons, I think as I said, conceptually there cannot be any objection to GAR, but it needs to be significantly narrowed and ring-fenced, and a lot of fetters put both in terms of the definition, the invocation, and the consequences.
Right. So Rohan, obviously what has provoked the government is the fact that a lot of companies set up structures that are aimed at either paying no tax or at least the least amount of tax possible. For example, the Mauritius route. A lot of people are coming through Mauritius because of the agreement we have with that country on avoiding double taxation. So what's wrong with the government trying to eliminate such a route?
I think what is drawing comment is that you can't have double speak on this issue. Either you are outraged with the factor that people are using the Mauritian route, then you really need to attack the route itself. What you can't have is a treaty which you say you are respecting, in relation to which you have certain administrative thresholds like a tax residency certificate, and at the same point in time use a separate set of laws like the GAR in terms of saying that I will scrutinize all of this, and if I find at very low thresholds that there is justification, then I will take actions which places the onus on you and also potentially overrides the treaty. So either you are saying that I have Mauritius there to condition a certain type of tax behavior and investment behavior, and through that tax and investment behavior the country has got a lot of investment. But if that is what you don't want, then specifically disown that, move away from it, rather than this double speak of saying Mauritius exists, but here are a whole series of factors and here are a whole series of provisions which could call that into question on a recurrent basis.
But Ketan, the fact that GAR was going to be introduced under DTC was well known to everyone. So obviously maybe your clients, and Rohan, maybe your clients have had the time to prepare for life after GAR. So some of them have already started working along those lines. So do you think they have been caught off guard by the speed with which it has been introduced in the budget? Or do you think the smarter ones have already done some work for life after GAR?
Have clients been preparing for this? How will you prepare for a situation like this? Because representations had been made to say that the way it is worded is very wide. So that was in the draft DTC. What has now emerged in the law is even wider, and a large number of representations by virtually every chamber of commerce, every association had been made. The standing committee had also made recommendations both in terms of ring fencing and in terms of onus of proof. And therefore, in a sense, to say that people have been taken off guard, the answer is yes. But as I said, many of these are not even structural issues. They are day-to-day commercial operations which will be hit by GAR. Right. So that is the issue today.
But let me come back to the Mauritius route. And Rohan, let me ask you, do you think some sort of a concession from the government in terms of a phased implementation of GAR as far as investment routed through Mauritius is concerned? Or what sort of concession would you really want for companies that have been caught off guard by this whole GAR provision in the budget?
Yeah. You know, one is this whole situation that you've described of being caught off guard. And if you go to why, the issue very clearly is this is far more onerous, this is far wider than was expected. And personally, I don't think this is the last word which has been spoken on the GAR, either in terms of the legislative stream or in terms of the rules and guidelines which will come. And we've heard from the finance minister that, you know, they are sensitive to what they are hearing, they will act. Now, when they act, the situation is, what will they do? One of the key issues is, what is your position of investments from Mauritius or transactions from Mauritius? What is the extent of your treaty override? And I think they will have to clarify that position to bring a certain amount of certainty to this process. The problem today is, no matter what I do, no matter what my intent, if I pay tax lesser than what government believes is ideal, and which typically would mean the highest potential tax, this provision could trigger. And that is not the way in which you can allow it to play, whether in the context of Mauritius or anywhere else. So quite clearly, you know, we'll have to come up with better thresholds and clearer guidelines before we have a fully formulated GAR.
Right. Now, Ketan, of course, stock markets are also in a tizzy because they expect P-notes also to get taxed. But do you think there's case at all for P-notes to come under GAR, because the Vodafone-like transaction is very different from day-to-day buying and selling of shares?
I think they could be attacked, and what will probably happen is the difficulty of going after the P-note holders will possibly result in the tax department going after the FIIs if indeed the intent is to attack P-note holders. And I think a whole separate series of issues will emerge out of that. So for example, can the FIIs being held liable as a representative SSE? Should they have withheld tax at source or not? And I think the net result will be possibly that the FIIs will either stop issuing the P-notes for some time till clarity emerges, and if it doesn't, one doesn't know what will happen, or they will seek to pass on the burden of a potential tax liability to the P-note holders by some kind of holding back taxes, and that will create its own stream of uncertainties and throw this thing into a further tizzy, is at least what I expect.
If you look around the world, which country would you say has possibly the best GAR provisions, which is industry friendly and which is also aimed at protection of the government's own revenue? Are there any examples or role model countries that India ought to be looking at?
There are examples that we can seek to emulate. The new guidelines that you have from UK, particularly from an owner's perspective. You know, you look at the US framework, and it is very, very seldom used because of both the approach and the nature in which it is structured. So I think you could draw, from examples like that. The key issue is, of course, India does have some of its unique challenges. Black money is a challenge very uniquely almost Indian. The whole issue with Havalas, the whole issues that you have, which ultimately also lead to this whole parallel stream of what happens in terrorist funding and illegal funding, etc. India is a nation beset with some of those problems. We suffer from them, and therefore I think we'll have to take a more local, colloquial flavor to this. But if we looked at the US and UK, in terms of thresholds, in terms of onus, and in terms of what you really need to be able to establish before you can trigger this off, I think those would be good lessons for us to take, while still fashioning it in the context of our very unique problems.
Right. So, Ketan, let me ask you, what kind of limitations or thresholds would you like to be set in GAR? Specifically, 3 or 4 key thresholds or limitations that you'd want to see in the final GAR ruling.
First of all, the definition has to be, to my mind, substantially more ring-fenced, and it can't be the kind of sweep that it has today. So that's one part. Secondly, clearly the onus of proof should be on the tax department. And the third, and probably a very important point, is that the fetters on invocation have to be very high. So for example, the current draft GAR is talking about an approving panel, which is good. But the approving panel, the composition of the approving panel, if it has just administrative commissioners whose job is to collect revenue, I think there will be an inherent conflict of interest. So perhaps, let's say people say within the government, but let's say from the economic department or economists from within the government, for example, having at least some knowledge of tax, that kind of composition would be useful, because If it is not that, then as I said, there would be conflict of interest.
So finally, gentlemen, let me get a sense of, how hopeful are you of the government actually coming out with rules which will probably end up circumscribing the powers of taxman under GAR?
One does expect that this will evolve and, there will be far greater safeguards brought in. Just to add to what Ketan was saying previously, in a lot of economic legislation, we have a threshold already prescribed, which is the threshold of having more than reasonable suspicion. And that has been interpreted judicially in India to say that unless you have enough material that a reasonable person would believe here is an act of evasion or fraud, you will not act. I think that is a concept we are very familiar with, and that is something that we ought to bring in. So I think, if we bring in issues like this, it will evolve, it will become better, but I don't think we will get to the sort of ideal stage that we want to. There will always be some play in the joints.
Right. Ketan?
I think a couple of points I want to make. First is that a large number of special anti-avoidance rules have already been brought into the legislation. For example, whether you look at dividend stripping, whether you look at deemed dividend, whether you look at the continuous expansion of transfer pricing. So in a sense, a diluted version of GAR already exists in the legislation today. So that's one point I wanted to make. The second is, as I said, the invocation threshold and the sweep is so wide that investors, both domestic and international, are feeling increasingly challenged with this. And the level of pain that is likely to emerge is such that it sometimes can cross the limit of tolerance, especially for international investors. And I think the government hopefully is beginning to recognize that in the last few days, at least from some reactions that have been coming formally and informally from the ministry. So one is hopeful that something will happen and the GAR will be watered down and ring-fenced in a much better manner than it is today.